how do you say your last name? That's a good question. That's what.
Behuniak, like every 2 words. Behuniak.
Okay, yeah, I would have butchered that.
It's super American.
Yeah, it sounds very American. I was gonna say like Tennessee, South Carolina ish.
Oh yeah, somewhere Eastern European.
Yeah,
one of those. Sickle and hammers.
We digress. Well, thanks for joining me on the podcast, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, we just, Malibu was just on here, so Malibu's episode's going to come out. So by the time someone's listening to this, then they'll know who he is. But he was just standing there over your shoulder because I guess he was helping you with the admin, the tech side of this. You had a busy week last week. Well, probably 2 weeks prior to that.
No, we got down to North Carolina on the 4th. We left on the 11th.
Was it crazy? Was it busy? What was? I
I
always see the videos and social media of Asheville. Like, it looks like it just got wiped off the face of the earth. But
we hit the ground running with an in-brief, pretty much where the boss was saying, anybody who needs help, you see any signs of distress, you land, you figure it out, get a grid, get a point of contact. If you can do something right there, you do it. If not, pass up the information, and they'll be on the next bird out.
Okay, here's my thought process about how this goes, because I don't understand helicopters. But you got all these helicopters, and then like even where I live, there are people who were like setting these trains of planes up to Asheville, filled with supplies.
Oh yeah,
I'm like, that seems like an absolute like air traffic control nightmare. But I guess in helicopters, you just don't worry about other planes and stuff. You're just like zipping around. But like that had to be, to me, it's like it had to be chaotic flying around there.
It really wasn't that bad. I was on all the social medias looking at it, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna have a midair. This is how it ends."
Is great.
All the pop-up TFRs and stuff that the FAA put in, and finally they just put a widespread NOTAM of, watch out for relief aircraft. Everybody talk on 23025 and rules of the road. And oh my God, it was incredible. The civilians that were working there with, spending their own gas money, their own maintenance, taking time away from their families, taking time away from their jobs and stuff like that was unworldly. Like, I could not imagine being able to do that. I was paid to be down there. Not much. State active duty is the best, but no, they were great. There was no midair incidents. There was no close calls. We'll get into it probably later, but we ended up changing our ADS-B out to our tactical call sign just because our tail number ended in 47. And there was 407, 417, 447, and it just got a little crazy. So putting our TAC ID in there made it a lot safer. And just so you could call out individuals when they were within 2 to 3 miles of you.
Interesting. That's something I never thought about. I wonder if the F-16 was like Mode S. I feel like when it was coming about and we had like an upgrade to the transponder, you could mission plan your call sign into it, but you couldn't change it airborne. I'm probably misquoting that. So you're saying basically with your ADS-B, you guys would put your tactical call sign in like Blackhawk 1, right?
Right.
So someone sees it on ForeFlight and
yeah, they know who to be looking for.
Yeah, but again, who's gonna be flying around at 50 feet anyways?
No, it was a beehive out there. It really was, between everybody with their R-44s and 206s, stuff like that. It was incredible. It really was. And the Blackhawk's not a big helicopter, and we were able to get into some tricky spots, but there were places where we wish we had a 58. So
really, I guess that's if you're landing in a field or a clearing or something like that. Obviously, you're not doing a clearing pass. You have the ability to hover, which is nice. But it's just kind of a judgment call if it's wide enough space to touch down and you don't see cables or anything weird like that, I guess.
Yeah, we did a 500-foot recon, 200-foot recon. We evaluated the wind so we wouldn't get loss of tilt or effectiveness or anything like that. And we're just smart about it. I mean, I sent you some pictures. We landed on a bridge in Bat Cave, and apparently the PJs wouldn't land there. They just dropped somebody on the winch so they could go make contact. Well, we shut down on the bridge, so that was all right.
No big deal. How much does a Blackhawk weigh?
The one we were with our crew was like 16.2.
Okay. It's not light. You said it was small, but I mean, that's not too small.
No, it's smaller than our brothers. We deployed down there, repositioned down there with a CH-47, and they're like in the 40,000 pounds.
That is a slightly larger helicopter. I will, not having been on one, just seen them. Like I'll agree. That's a larger helicopter.
But no, we hit the ground running, and day one, Malibu and I, we got in the aircraft, which is hilarious because he was saying, 12 years of doing this, and we've never had the opportunity. We've always said no, and then it was probably Wednesday before we left that the message went out, hey, who wants to volunteer? And he was number 1. I was number 5. I actually booted a kid off of booted his commander off the mission. And just to go ahead and take a junior crew and a senior crew so we could pair the cockpit up the best we could so there would be no incidents. And him and I just did day 1 to get a lay of the land. We flew 8 hours is what the computer said. We accidentally logged 7 so we wouldn't get yelled at because that was our maximum combined of day, night, and goggle. We had a 2-hour duty day extension, no go pills or anything like that. We just, a couple Celsius and sent it. And
no big deal.
Yeah. First mission we did was flying FEMA around. I didn't even know who I was picking up. We just landed near Mission Hospital, north of Asheville. Picked up 3 FEMA dudes. They were doing a search for rescue for a vehicle that got wiped off a bridge. And from my understanding, that creek was maybe 4 or 5 feet deep pre-Helene, and it was like 30 feet, and it was just so opaque we couldn't see in it. We spent probably an hour in about 3 football fields radius just searching, hovering, trying to get high angles, low angles, see if we could see any reflection off of anything. Unable to find it, which is horrible. But, yeah.
I wonder, do you have any inclination what the death toll is? I mean, I feel like I still haven't seen that. It still seems like
it was like right around 118 when I left. And when we got on the ground, they were 2,500 missing, was the unofficial number. And I think as of Friday that we left, it was 38 missing, which is spectacular.
Yeah, it's a huge swing in the right direction, but still.
And so it was different. So we got done with flying FEMA for about 3 hours as we searched around with them, and then linked up with a group to go ahead and make contact with these super, super remote areas that were just cut off by landslides, no power, no internet, no roads, and just landing there, dropping supplies off, shutting down, seeing what they need between medication, blankets, food. The water that they had was they had pallets of water. One of the guys was like, if you send us more water, we're going to start washing our cars with it. But I mean, yeah, the terrain there was significant. We just got back from OIR where I was operating up northeast of Kirkuk and Erbil, and then all the way out to eastern Syria. And, I'm used to the density altitudes of 7,000 to 11,000 feet, power management, stuff like that. And, but the difference is the deliberate planning of, hey, this is the X, this is where you're going to with a time versus, hey, you're just going to be flying in and out of these ridge lines from, 6,300 feet above sea level to 1,000 feet above sea level. And that terrain distance is just a slant of a mile maybe. So timing that descent for a low, high recon and not balling it up on the way in was fun.
Yeah, I guess it's something that, I've obviously never thought about in those aspects, but that's some big swings going from 1,000 to 6,000 in a Blackhawk, right? Not as much of a factor in F-16, but nonetheless, you're dealing with a lot of different things, especially compared to where you've been operating in the last 6 months or so of your life. But
New England's relatively flat.
Yeah, well, it's good. It's good to spice things up. I think as you said in your bio, you're a student of aviation. You're always learning.
Oh, yes. No, never miss a good opportunity to learn. And you can learn on mission. Just as long as you don't twist metal or hit anything, you're good.
All right. One last piece about Asheville. Is there anything that stands out? Was there any one particular sortie? Or was it pretty much just routine? Anything that popped to your mind there that you'll take away for eternity or whatever cliche saying I can come up with next?
Between the bridge landing and the dynamic environment, the you go from one mission that's completely different to another one. We landed up at, I think it was Elk River Airport, NCO6, and linked up with a bunch of dudes who were group guys and PJs that just took leave. And they set up a Ford resupply area. And there was a dock there, and we landed, shut down, got connected of, hey, who needs help? We can put 6,500 pounds in the back of our helicopter. Let's go bring it somewhere. Because this was still the early days of resupply and rescue. And there was an elderly lady that was going DKA. She was probably 3 days without her insulin, which is no good. So we landed in her attempted to land in her backyard, but the dock was on comms, and we had a follow-on mission after that. And she's like, this is the wrong spot. This is the wrong spot. I was like, no, the grid's good. Had to do a go around and tell her, like, no, this is the lady that you have to go give her insulin before we go to the next mission. So landed in her backyard, dropped the insulin off, and did a wellness check. Life was good for the elderly lady. And then went to, I think it's Bird's Chapel or something like that. And this place was devastated. The bridge was gone. One of the pics I sent you, there's a Ford F-350 crew cab that's just smashed up in the river. Everybody's been trying to resupply that place, but the roads are no good. Their brakes went out and they hit an embankment and Dukes of Hazzarded it into the river. But our mission got so long that night. We were supposed to land to the chapel and drop off about 4,000 pounds of cargo and medicine, blankets, stuff like that. And there was just no good avenue of approach under goggles with our wonderful 40-degree field of view. We couldn't ensure that everything was clear, so we had some volunteer from one of the units up near Bragg or Liberty, and he rigged all this stuff to get kicked out of the aircraft with a tarp parachute. So we just held about a 20-minute hover while they exfilled almost 4,000 pounds of cargo out of the side of the aircraft like heroes. It was great. I mean, and in the middle of it, I'm starting to brown out from the sand from the river, and got the vent blower on, keeping me nice and cool. Life is good. And now I'm starting to get blind by the sand. And I tell my co-pilot Seabass, like, hey, turn the vent blower off. I'm going blind here. And just doing my best to keep the aircraft so we're not dropping the supplies on any vehicles or the building. And mission complete. That was a new one. That's a task that I wasn't qualified to do, but being a SP, I just kind of checked the block like, I just qualified myself. Life is good.
Make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, people need help. We're gonna do the right thing.
I love that aspect. It seems like from a very dynamic scenario and situation, with the usually the rigidity of regulations and just op orders, etc. That an environment like that, you need some flexibility and to be able to make the game day decision as an aircraft commander, pilot, whatever it might be, to make things happen. So it's always good when that stuff comes together for sure.
Oh yeah. So, but
right.
The devastation was wild. Like just mudslides everywhere.
I'll obviously put those pictures in there. I mean, it's just, you see it on social media, you see it on the news. I'm sure seeing it in person, it's again a whole nother level of realism there. Having been to Asheville several times, seeing some of the stores or restaurants or businesses that at least I recognize, and then what they look like now, you're like, it's wild. I don't know. Asheville in the mountains, like you don't necessarily associate this place could just have a biblical flood that just wipes it off the face of the earth. Like that's wild to me. But thoughts and prayers to them. Hopefully improving. But it is amazing from going from 2,500 missing to 38 missing. That's a big swing. So.
Oh yeah.
All right, we digress. I want to jump back into, tell me a little bit about you, background, what got you into flying, what put you on this path, and what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I started flying when I was 6 or 7 years old. My grandfather retired 06, regular Air Force, then Reserve, then Guard. He did, I think, 30 years in the Air Force. So when he was in the Indiana Guard, he was living upstate New York. So he bought a Piper Arrow so he could commute to and from. And he got me into flying. It was great. From sitting on a milk crate to phone books to graduating to being able to see the instruments. And than actually flying. It was a lot of fun. Him and I did that until he got cancer when I was 17. He survived it. Life is good there. But he lost his medical, had to get rid of the airplane. I enlisted in the military after college when I was 18 or 19 and joined as a Blackhawk mechanic. In 2009, I deployed as a door gunner and phase team leader, so just tearing the aircraft down to nuts and bolts and putting it back together after a month of inspections pretty much. And I got to crew.
You're a door gunner and maintainer at the same time?
Right. So
Spicy,
I wasn't a
right.
full-up crew chief, so I got to fly the missions that all the crew chiefs didn't want to do. And which is cool. You know, it had a lot of perks to it. We were out of Buehring in Kuwait, but got to do about a month in Iraq, which was awesome. That was right when that big hurricane or whatchamacallit, the volcano erupted in 2009, and a lot of the flights couldn't get through Turkmenistan or whatever. So we had to push 2 crews up to Iraq to help them out with battlefield circulation. So that was unique, getting to carry a 240 every day and just doing the best that I could, being fresh in the Army. I think after training to boots on ground wasn't even 90 days after I graduated the mechanic school, which was awesome because it left any time for me to learn how to be stupid. It was just full Army and, you know, mature as a young adult with the Army instead of the guard way of graduate and do your 1 week in a month.
Did you enlist knowing that, hey, you're going to enlist in the Guard with, I'm going to pursue, you know, pilot training? Or did you enlist because I just want to, I want to go in the Army for X, Y, or Z? What was that impetus?
I wanted my college paid for, so I got student loan repayment program. I never thought I was smart enough to be in the military. And then, you know, we had one of the pilots. We were on short final, returning to a base after like a 6-hour flight. He was fatigued and started flipping through the checklist while we were on approach, which I don't condone. It's not the greatest thing, time and a place. And he got too far into it and identified the wrong switch, turned the one of the pilot redundancies off. And it goes from like 3,000 PSI and you lose pretty much 1,000 PSI of command in the flight controls. And as we were like 12 feet, he turned the switch back on, smacked into the ground. Like, the aircraft was fine, no twisted metal, and that was the day I was like, well, if this idiot can do it, I can do it. So I took the test, boarded a month after I got home. In March of 2011, I was in pilot training and just did my best to not get kicked out, which, you know, wasn't hard to do, but it was a good cohort that I was with. When I was down in North Carolina, I ran into some of the guys that I graduated with, and that was really cool. From there, just worked my tail off and made pilot in command or aircraft commander in 2016, just before JRTC rotation. Transferred from the air assault unit to the Medevac. Went to the same school Alex went to, or Malibu went to, which was the Aviation Mission Survivability Officer School, followed by the Instructor Pilot School, and then my Medevac deployment for 18-19. Came back, went to the air assault again, became their SP, and then this July, we deployed in 23, came home in 24, and then this July they moved me up to battalion stance, which is unique. It's a weird position to be in.
All right, you're going to break down some of the acronyms from Army speak. So we'll dig into that. I do have a question. I can't remember if Malibu and I talked about this. So obviously you enlisted in the Guard as a maintainer / door gunner, which is pretty awesome. But to get picked up for that pilot training slot, I imagine you met a board. Does the Army Guard, so like the Air National Guard for the Air Force side of the house, like each unit, like say they get maybe every 2 years or every 3 years, they get 1 or 2 pilot training slots. Like it's allocated out and forecast based on manning needs. So a lot of guys will enlist in that unit as a maintainer, kind of get to, as the thought of like getting to know people and then they're homegrown, and then when the board comes around, they apply, and that unit selects them to send them on to pilot training. How does that work for the Army side of the house?
So for the Guard here, it's open carte blanche. Any MOS, any rank, it really doesn't matter. And we also open it for street to seat. I've had the pleasure of sitting on 2 of those boards, so seeing it from the other side of the house is unique. Being the person who's, hey, this panel of people has, control of my destiny pretty much for the rest of my military career to that. So the last board I sat on, we had, I want to say 3 seats, 11 applicants. We selected 3. We wanted to select more. There was a incredible amount of candidates there. And then what do we look for? Well, same thing that I believe the Air Guard does is, can you sit in the aircraft for 6-7 hours with them? Are they going to be a liability on a TDY? And do they have the aptitude to fly something that needs, both hands, both feet, and your mouth and your brain running all at the same time? So any evidence that they can do that, whether it's command letters of recommendation, have they flown fixed wing at all before? Have they taken a helicopter lesson? Oddly enough, do they play sports? Because being part of a team is huge. And then a random question I ask is, can you drive stick? Because that's probably the closest thing to not flying as you can get, which is weird.
I've never, obviously never sat on a hiring board for the Air National Guard. I've had people ask me this all the time, which I think you just kind of hit it home. I was like, what's advice? But it's like, ultimately, like if you have all the boxes checked, like, all right, college, check. Now I'm sure GPA could be a delineating factor if it like really came down to it. But like ultimately, like, I mean, you're hiring this person for potentially 20 years in the unit plus. So if they suck, it's really tough to get rid of them. But two, it's like, can I go live with this person for 6 months and then go fly? Count on it as like being the good dude or dudette is always an important piece if you have the left hand, right hand skills. And being an athlete, turns out you probably got some eye hand coordination. Like that's like I can divide by 2 in most cases, and I can usually multiply by 2, which it feels like the most math I've had to do in the jet. Maybe. Yeah. It was a couple times. So it's like I don't want to build it. I just need to fly it.
No, I'm not a mathematician. Like lat long to MGRS, that pretty much makes my brain explode, but I can do it.
I don't know, unable here. Like put it in the plane and it spits it out. That probably seems about right. That'd be, no thanks. Decimal minutes to minutes, seconds, whatever it might be. Like, who does this? Can we just have one standard thing? All right. Would you have one piece of advice for someone who is rushing a Guard unit, or they've gotten to the point where they're applying, sitting in front of the board, that helps them delineate themselves from the other applicants?
Yeah, the best thing that I could say is if you're already in the military, most Guard units fly during the week, or all Guard units fly during the week. Figure out when that is. Get on a paid status, go for a flight. Show up there before the crew shows up. Help tie down the aircraft after the mission. Do it. Just be involved with the process, and don't do it just once. Because as anybody who's in the military knows, with the flying commitment, it's huge. Especially as a guardsman, that's a second job. And it's a full-time job with the admin, the academics, the flying, etc. So showing a commitment that, okay, I've showed up 5, 6, 7, 8 times. I kind of understand how the system works from an outsider, and talking with the aviators, getting to know their stories, because with the Army now, it's a 10-year commitment, and some people at year 4 say it's just not for me. And, I'm not saying that you're wasting anybody's time. You're serving your country, which is huge. But it's one of those things that if after year 4, if you don't want to do it, you took potentially a seat from somebody who could do the same job, if not a better job.
What's your time commitment after pilot training for you?
I'm done with my time commitment. I'm just doing it for a paycheck now. No.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get to 20.
I'm in it for the money.
Yeah. No, I got 3.5 years until my 20. But as far as these new grads, it's 10 years, which is wild.
Yeah. Are you under the old retirement system?
Yes.
I'm wondering, I think the military, this is going to be, Rain's humble opinion, it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. Because you were probably right there at the end. Was it 20? Actually, you came in early. So I was like, what is it? It was, blended retirement that popped in somewhere in that time frame, and then there was a long transition period. What's that?
Right. I think it was like 19 or 20 that came in. Which it seems like a good deal with 401k matching or TSP matching and all that stuff. It doesn't seem like if you manage your money right, I don't think it's going to be a bad retirement.
No, I agree. I mean, it's one of those too. It's like if you do 10 years or you do 8 years or 4 years, you're at least walking away with something versus you and I, it's all or nothing. So I think that's the point of it would be that 20-year carrot that's hanging out in front of a lot of people's faces that has helped with retention to get people to stay into 20. Like in the next decade, that will no longer exist. There'll no longer be anyone who is on that old pension plan that let's figure out how to retain people more and more. And being a full-time guardsman, or being a part-time guardsman and having another job, I'd imagine that's a little bit to juggle. Unless even if you're like an airline guy, where if you have to drop mill leave, you're good, right? But if you're doing anything that's not like the airlines and it's like your sales or a business owner, it's like, oh yeah, boom, you just got to pop up and leave for 6 months from your primary job, like while you're protected. Doesn't really help with career advancement and progression, I would imagine.
No, it's tough. Before I got my technician job at the facility, I was working for Lockheed, and trying to fly 2 periods Wednesday, 2 periods Thursday meant that time that I was missing at the office, I was making up Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
But I had that goal. I had that golden nugget or North Star, whatever you want to call it. But I wanted to be where I'm at right now, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in my place. I think M-Day, I flew 260 something hours, which is far exceeding our minimums. It's 96 hours a year is what's required.
Yeah, that's a lot of rotor time.
Right, but we were also gearing up for OIR 1819.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, we're going to dig on all that. So just to kind of wrap up the getting you to this point. Your grandfather, obviously a big influence in your life. C-130s, F-86s. I think you mentioned, I got to hear, it's like flying C-130s to the Arctic, servicing radar stations during the Cold War. That had to be wild. Yeah,
he was with the Schenectady Guard with the Firebirds, and those guys are awesome. I bumped into him a couple times, and it's incredible hearing how that unit stood up the polar ice cap mission and flying with skis, and they're still doing it. It's like,
wild.
Yeah, no thanks.
Hard pass. Hard nope thanks on my end for that.
Yeah.
It sounds absolutely terrifying to me. So in my current day job, we're going to start doing polar ops. That's
nice.
I guess a special certification from the FAA. And someone shared a picture of like KLM's like polar survival gear that they used to issue, and it was like a rifle, like all this like heavy weather. I'm like, you're dead if you crash a 777 up in the Arctic, but you're like, nah, like I'm good. I don't want to.
You thought you were done with poopy suits.
Yeah, like, no, I just got to wear this for the next like 6 hours to go across. So you die angry, because you're still going to die. It's just a matter of being uncomfortable the whole time.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned too, like in the email you sent over, your dad. So he flew AH-1s. You guys got to fly together and do his Finney flight, which I think is pretty badass.
It was something that you wouldn't think you'd ever be able to do. It was crazy. My grandfather teaching me how to fly. My dad was the senior instructor of the state. Didn't get to fly with him a whole lot, but no, it was incredible. He had a wild history in the Guard too, and big shoes to fill. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to do my own path, but definitely have taken a lot of lessons, listened to a lot of AARs, and just a little bourbon time where he got to go off the record and talk about stuff that he wish he got to do. So
was he a full-time guardsman, like kind of through and through, or what? Okay.
So, he started with the 101st active duty. He left active duty in 89, I think it was, and then joined the Mass Guard. And he got picked up full-time in the mid-90s, and he stayed technician for 30 years, which was a good retirement if anybody's looking to do that, especially with the healthcare side of the house.
Would you want to explain a little bit like how how that works, like technician / being a guardsman? So you get like Title 10, 32, like you're wearing a flight suit, but you're because you're a technician now, right?
Right.
Okay.
It's absolutely a hidden gem, and especially where OPM, any flying job is supposed to be a GS-12 or 13. With your locality or whatever, wherever you are in the country, it's going to be different than where I'm at. But Monday through Friday, you wear the uniform, but you're a federal technician, and you have your job. So my full-time job is to teach people the military side of the house of how to fly, and then I'd still do my 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. And so it's pretty much as close to active duty as you can without all the BS of PT, admin, etc. It's just show up, do your job. And it's really one of the hidden secrets to the Guard that a lot of people don't understand is why is this 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year force able to outpace and outdo the active duty? And it's, we still do all the admin stuff on drill, but we really care about our jobs instead of, commander's calls and stuff like that. You show up, and with the limited time that you have, you got to squeeze every drop out of it.
Oh, you don't care about commander's calls? Oh,
I mean,
commanders.
It is what it is, right? Yeah, mandatory fun isn't fun.
Yeah, so as a technician, you're a federal employee, so I'm thinking, as you said GS-12, GS-13, but you're wearing a flight suit or you're wearing a uniform, which I think is the part that is kind of weird. So you're getting a paycheck for being a CW3 on your 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, but then the rest of the time you're a GS-12 or GS-13. It's convoluted, right. But
yeah. And with
government.
With the new retirement system, you especially Guard side, if you're a technician, if you can pump that entire check into your TSP, it's going to go really far after 30 years of technician to get that pension, and plus a technician pension. So you're kind of just double dipping, which is great. It's a long road. I'm only 9 years as a tech, and I don't know if I could do 30.
You're almost there.
Ish. But then if anybody's looking at going from active duty to tech, you can buy back all your Title 10 time, which is great. So you don't start out at day zero.
Okay, that's what they mean by that. I guess I never really thought about that. So you would, if you did 8 years active duty, you could buy that time back once, and now you're like, okay. So then you'd have to do 22 years to get you over that hump. But you would not get, I guess if you drilled for 20 years as a guardsman, then you get your guard pension. Because you lose that 8 years, right?
Not really. I'm not on the admin side of the house. I'm not the smartest one.
Well, we're gonna quote you on this. We're gonna etch this in stone. So when anyone bases their career decisions based upon this conversation, they can blame you.
No, I guess there was a PPOM that came out that said, hey, if you're already at your 20 and you want to serve 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, you can draw your pension from active duty and still, you just pretty much don't get paid for the weekend. That money goes back towards your retirement. So you continue to accrue a little bit of, I guess, for inflation, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, when my grandfather retired in 97, 20 years down the road, that 06 paycheck wasn't what he thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Turns out. I mean, I don't think there's inflation. I mean, they say it's all good. So,
Yeah. Life is fine. 60-50.
All right. Well, we dove into a little bit of how you got to where you are now, but talk to me about the early days of your Army aviation career. What was that looking like? What were you doing?
So after deployment, I really didn't touch a wrench at all, unless if something really needed to happen, because pilots aren't supposed to turn wrenches. We're only good at being a meat servo, not a ratchet clicker. So I just got out of flight school. I picked up a short tour ADOS, which is active duty, working brigade staff, which was enlightening because I had no idea how many people it takes to keep the lights on at the end of the day. So it's just admin working everybody's most favorite system in the military, DTS.
Oh, nice.
And I was like that level 20 reviewer, and I hated my life, sending emails of, hey, how come I need this receipt? It's $87.30. So, we need that. It was garbage.
I never thought I'd say it. The place I work now, the travel system is worse than DTS. I never thought I would say that.
It can be.
The history of the world. Like, DTS is terrible. The one I got now is even worse. So,
but my boss was Command Sergeant Major, or E9. He was super awesome. Let me fly anytime. So anytime somebody canceled, I'd get a text or a phone call. Hey, can you be here in 40 minutes? Like, on the way. Let's go.
Nice.
So filling in holes in the flight schedule, and just flew my tail off as long as I could. The money dried up for that brigade staff job, which forced me to get a real job at Lockheed. So I was pretty much working for Department of the Navy on their Seahawk program. And we were doing product and process improvement. And my entire job was to trim the fat, whether it's review a component on how we can make it better for, if it's a part number -50, well, on 51, we'll change this about it, and it'll make it last longer, and which was highly rewarding, saving the taxpayers money, because, I hate seeing half my paycheck go to somewhere.
I just think it bought me all the jet fuel I burn. That's why I'm like, that's how I sleep at night. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I burn my tax dollars in JP8. That's how I want to digress real quick. So, because Lockheed bought Sikorsky, right? Original manufacturer of the Blackhawk. But I don't know, maybe people are somewhat familiar. Air Force has Pavehawks. Navy has Seahawks. Is the Coast Guard Jayhawks?
Yes.
And then Army's Blackhawks. UH-60, airframe.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me like the differences of like each one of those? I assume they like roll out the assembly line on the same deal, just different sport packages.
Base frame is all made on the same jig for all of these, whether it's a MH, UH, HH, like model is all they're building now, or even same thing for foreign military sales. And then it'll go to a different specialty shop. So it'll roll out of there. Maybe the cabin or the cockpit's a little bit different, or the stuff that's hung on it is a little bit different, like a rescue hoist or a forward-looking infrared. There we go, FLIR. And then it'll go to specialty shops, whether it's Lakehurst, Pennsylvania, West Palm Beach, etc., to get outfitted the way the customer needs it. But it's all the base airframe instead of now the modern 60s. It's pretty much where the struts to the transmission and engines is just one piece CNC instead of 30 layers of aluminum riveted together, which makes it a little bit stronger. And then pretty much what the Navy's now flying Romeos and Sierras, which are just completely different mission sets. And one has the tail wheel underneath the gas tanks, and one has the tail wheel the same spot that the Blackhawk does.
Well, why is that?
Ships. So I'm sure people have seen that video of the, was it the Air Force or Navy or Coast Guard, where they went to they landed at Wall Street, the helipad there, that's like a floating barge, and they went to ground taxi and their tail wheel came off the edge.
No. As I Google right now.
Yeah, that was not a good look.
That was the Navy?
I don't know which one it was. You could just type in 60 taxis off pier. It's not a great one, because being a tail dragger, we don't turn like a 172.
I mean, makes sense. I can see that. Well, there's a lot of like helicopter things that foreign concepts to me, such as, I think you alluded to it briefly with the Asheville discussion of like blanking the tail rotor, which is that the same thing as like the Bin Laden raid, like where they're landing inside the compound? I don't know, something with like aerodynamics occurred, a phenomena with like the rotor wash, right? When it's like landing inside the compound and caused it to lose lift. Is that the same?
Oh yeah, loss of tail rotor effectiveness. It's just your lifting surface or counter rotating surface just stalls, unfortunately, whether it's like because of the tailwind that you have, kind of requires more angle of attack or angle of incidence out of the blades than it can generate. So that big spinning fan takes over. It's got a lot of torque to move that. Okay,
this is gonna be a first time ever. I'm gonna bring up this video on this episode. So let's see if this works here.
Old Joe Rogan right here.
Yeah, I need a Jamie. Instead it's me, which is probably not going to work out, and it's going to end in tragedy. So let's see. I don't know if does that show it to you yet?
No, but I can picture it in my head.
Yeah. Oh, I don't have like, the dialogue box doesn't have, so close. Maybe gotta minimize the screen here. Yeah, went too far. Just can't have nice things.
But no, so the differences in the Blackhawks are pretty big, or the 60s are. Like the Navy, they've got bigger fuel tanks than we do, and same thing with the Coast Guard. They also have like 3 auxiliary fuel tanks, so they can make a mile, especially when they're doing, mid-air refueling, going 600 miles off the coast. That's a skill set that I don't have, and more power to those guys of that. Like, I got a 2-hour bladder, man. Like, I'm not doing that.
Dude, I have that sounds absolutely terrifying. Obviously, it's a skill set and a mission set that is needed, but no thanks. It does say in this it was a MH-60S Nighthawk. So
okay,
Seahawk, Nighthawks. Can't keep track of all these things.
It's weird. I mean, so I've flown the Alpha, Alpha Plus, Lima, and Mike. I'm only current in the Mike now. But getting back to the different series, so we talked about the Navy, the Coast Guard. I can't keep track of what series they're on now, but they pretty much, I don't know if they've ever bought a brand new aircraft. It seems like they just get the hand-me-downs from the Navy and retrofit them to their mission. And then the newest one for the Air Force, the MH-60, is an incredible platform. But man, it's like our Medevac aircraft on the ramp are like 17.2, 17.3. And these dudes, because they're CSAR and they've got all their multi-mission sets, they're only designed to pick up a aircrew of 1 or 2. So they're they're within 600 pounds of max gross weight anywhere they go.
Really? It doesn't give you a whole lot of wiggle room to, I guess, adjust for mission needs and requirements.
But the engines that they have are really good. The 701s, I mean, continuous 2,000 shaft horsepower side plus, and then you got contingency for almost another 700, or mill power for 10 seconds, and it'll get you where you need to go, Walt. And we've operated 22,000 pounds up at 7,000 feet above sea level, probably Iraq summertime, 15,000 DA. And
yeah, it's impressive.
The engines will always make the power you need. It's just your margin of error is a little bit slimmer.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in Malibu, like I was casual in an H-860 squadron waiting to go to pilot training and like not know anything about it. And I remember this one crew went out to New Mexico and they were showing this photo of this guy. And I mean, he was 90 degrees nose low in the Pave Hawk. And to me, I'm like, whatever. Like, yeah, planes, like they dive at the ground all the time. But I didn't know about all the other, like one, the super high density altitude for that. They had like no issue just like cruising up there. And then 2, apparently, I guess your rotors are doing weird things. And to like dive it at the ground is a rather significant emotional event in a helicopter.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know any better.
So they say. So it's interesting. Obviously, the whiskey model for the Air Force, I think they're originally buying 126 of them, and then they said, nah, and they were buying like 70 of them now because they said CSAR is NA for future conflicts. I paraphrased, but yeah.
Sure.
They give you a warm point. We're not coming to get you. I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
You got boots. Get moving.
Yeah. It's the Army way. Okay, so now, as a technician, day in and day out, you're in the standardization office now,
right?
So can you tell people a little bit about what we call in the Air Force is stand eval, which I would imagine that's pretty much the same thing you're doing these days, everyone's favorite. But what's a day in the life of?
Well, if you're coming to get your stand eval, we ask that you go ahead and do your academics prior to, because if you fail that, I don't want to burn the commander's flight time just to regress you. But
does the commander have to do your check rides or
no?
Okay.
No, so it's SP on SP for evals, which is sometimes the most dangerous flight you'll ever be in, but we can get to that later.
And is that a standardization pilot? So you
right.
guys, okay. We call it like CFEs and FEs, flight evaluators.
But we evaluate your operator knowledge, your foundational knowledge, and then your ability for tactics, and then we do pretty much a flight review of base tasks and then mission tasks. And as long as you're within the aircrew training standard, you're good to go. And it's really not that hard. And it's funny seeing these new kids come in where it might be their first or second one. They're uptight, locked up, and ready to go. And it's like, hey man, I put my pants on one leg at a time the same way you did. Just do the same thing that you did last week and you're going to be fine. Don't try anything new on a check ride.
Right. Don't do anything extra.
Yeah, and don't give me more information than I'm asking for, because then I'm going to start pulling at that string, and we're going to find where the end of your knowledge ends.
Yeah. Let that be like just word of advice for anyone doing. Like, check rides suck no matter what you're doing. Now, I mean, it's just like, I treat it as like, obviously, I just do what I would do any day. But it is amazing sometimes, like, they're like, you want to do anything else? Like, oh, yeah, I'd like to do another pattern. You're like, why? Like, you just exposed yourself to more risk. Like, and it's like, is it a yes, no question? Like, that's all you're getting. Not like, yes, blah, blah, blah. Like, someone opens up their mouth and you get shot in the face once. You won't do that again, that's for sure.
But I hate giving check rides because, you know, I really, really enjoy teaching. And sometimes if they're almost there, it's like, as stern and professional as I like to believe I am, which I'm not, I always give them like a little hint of, hey, a little bit of right rudder or right pedal will help you out with this maneuver. I'm like, shit, now I'm teaching. I shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. Well, you know, just make everyone better. I'm sure, like, you've seen it, right? Like, being in the aviation world, you have to police yourself, or police your own, rather. So you got to hold everyone to a higher standard. But there's no perfect sortie. And you go out there, like, hopefully, like, doing everything you need to do. But, like, occasionally, like, well, you know what? This would be a great opportunity because, like, if I just said this one thing, might help this person out and then fix it. Like, it's not egregious or anything like that, but it's a great learning opportunity. But, you know,
without
check rides are, like, very interesting. Like, how we've, like, in the aviation world, like, how they've developed. And it's like, on this one day, if you do this wrong, dude, you're done. And you go out and do it the next day, and it's like, it's fine. We're just going to debrief that, you know. But on the one day of the year that you do your check ride, like, it's, dude, all or nothing.
Yeah, it's unique. And then our aircrew training manual, or ATM, especially as an instructor, really limits what I can and can't evaluate. So you got to do 3 emergency procedures, and after, you know, Army aviation hasn't had a great 48 months or more now. So we've gotten a lot more strict on what we can and can't disable in the aircraft. Which is great because now we have simulators and we get to do all that in the sim until either they get it right or until they're red-eyed and blue in the face.
You guys have had a couple whoopsies over the last 18 months?
Not our unit or our guard organization, but yeah, it's not been a great safety record.
Well, when you're saying, I guess with that, is that doing like simulated emergencies, like shutting stuff off in the helicopter?
Mm-hmm. So our back wing, our stabulator, variable angle of incidence to streamline with main rotor downwash, and does all this great stuff that nobody really cares about. But, you know, they used to call it a crash hawk if you were flying near a radio antenna. That wing at whatever airspeed you were going was going to slew full down, which would just point the nose at the earth. And if you didn't react immediately, you were going into the ground. And unfortunately, there was a crew that lost their lives a couple of years ago, upstate New York, because we used to be able to manually slew that down to stress the aircrew member of, hey, this is an instinctive maneuver. This is, as right now, not let me think about it. And the pilot on the controls made the incorrect flight control input, and instead of manually slewing that or overriding that wing to go full up, they ended up doing a tumbling into the earth, which is horrible. So we're no longer allowed to slew that down in flight.
Sim's a good spot to try that.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, I think 2 aircraft crashed in Egypt because of something similar. So it was a bad track record for the 60 program.
I guess I thought about too, like they did that Blackhawk, I know, probably completely unrelated, the one out in Utah or Colorado, like Looked like a whiteout, maybe. I don't know.
Oh yeah. And the thing about that one is that was in their backyard. You know, everybody hates this, but routine training exercise. You got to be able to do this. We're an all-weather aircraft, so do it the first time, the right time, every time. And if you don't train it, then you're not going to be able to do it on day one. So you just got to get good. And unfortunately, spatial disorientation is real, especially when you can't see the ground. They did their best, and sometimes it's not good enough.
I can't imagine what like a whiteout or a brownout. Imagine the brownouts, obviously, for where we've been operating the last 25 years is more of a commonplace thing. But the fact of like, yeah, you're going to land here on maybe uneven terrain or whatever it might be. And then, oh, by the way, you're now just in a dust cloud. I know there's like some gamesmanship of like trying to roll it on or whatever you guys do in the helicopter. But dude, that's spicy. That would not be fun. I would not enjoy that at all.
No, it's my least favorite thing to do is like a 10 out of 10 brownout where you don't see the ground until maybe 3 feet, browning out at 50. And generally by 20 feet, if you don't see the ground, you just do a go around and life's going to be fine. And if we're a multi-ship, we try and have Dash 2 or Chalk 2 land first so we're not throwing our dust right at them.
Yeah. Whole different set of problems. You don't have you have a radar altimeter in that thing?
Yes.
But does it call anything out? Probably not. Be annoying.
You get a ding wherever you set the low bug, which we generally have at admin set up at 50 feet.
Okay. Well, 50 feet to 0 feet, still a lot of feet to fall if you're... I now, like, 777, it's like 50, 40, 30, 20. Not that fast. If you heard that, then it was going to hurt. But it's kind of nice to have that thing calling out. Yeah, because you can't see anything. So, all right. So, again, kind of looking at your bio here, you bounce around a little bit, but you do a stint with Medevac, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did not realize this. I did mention with Malibu, like Medevac, dust off, not having guns, which I'm like, why wouldn't you just be like an HH-60 and, put PJs or something on so you could carry guns, like instead of putting a big red bullseye on the side of your helicopter. I mean, hats off. Like you're hanging it out there with no guns. Because not like the Taliban's like, oh, that's a medical helicopter. We're not going to shoot at that.
But yeah, ISIS definitely cared about that.
Yeah. Like, oh no, ignore that one. Let them in. Yeah. Let them in. We don't want to shoot that. That's wild.
Yeah. So dust off was probably the most rewarding flying I've ever done.
Okay.
We had a spicy deployment in 1819 for some of us and other people, depending on, where the cards felt and where you went. It was pretty admin, but I mean, somebody calling you on their worst day and you got to do your best to help them out, and just on call was incredible. You never want to get that call because it means that somebody really needs you. But if somebody's going to get hurt, I'd rather be the person to help out.
Well, I was looking at that in that deployment there. I would like to dig in it, but it looked like you were all over the place from Erbil to, I don't know how you pronounce it, the Lafarge cement factory.
Oh yeah,
which I'm thinking it's the same. It's the same one that it's a massive complex. Like flew over it in the early days of OIR. I'm like, man, this is like they're obviously making a lot of cement up here. Turns out the French company got, I think, sued by the DOJ for so. I don't know, conflicts with ISIS or something like that. But
if you're in NATO selling to the enemy, it's probably not a good look.
Yeah, it's slightly. It turns out a lot of those buildings up in northern Syria, that must have been like Russian or Soviet influence. There was one building up there called like the Under Armour building. And I mean, I don't know. We probably put a couple 500 pounds in it, but I know like a B1 one day put like 36 500 pounds. Like the thing didn't move. Like it was so much concrete. I'm like, that's how that concrete plant stays in business. It's whoever designed all this stuff. Just everything like oversized, overdone concrete planning.
Yeah, the first cement factory, we called it Disneyland. I don't know why they stamped like Mickey Mouse and stuff into the walls. It was kind of creepy.
Yeah, I couldn't get that close. So obviously you're a little closer. I'm like at 18,000 feet. I'm like, that's a really big cement factory down there up in northern Syria.
Yeah, it was weird because like a Medevac company is 15 aircraft and 17 air crews or maybe 20 air crews. I'm not at it anymore, so don't quote me on that. and they just branch out to become expeditionary and go to the forward locations. It was an interesting deployment for sure, because every FOB that people were at had a completely different fight. From, the guys down in the Merv or the Middle Euphrates River Valley, it was straight up just ISIS hunting. So
you landed, I guess, in and around that cement factory?
No, that was where one of the FOBs was.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so that's where they slept, lived, and everything.
That wild. That's
especially with
cool.
Russia right on the other side of the river.
That, such a weird dynamic, and I think that's what probably most people don't fully appreciate, the fact that of all the confluence of things going on, like for us, we couldn't cross the border into Turkey at the time, but the Turks it was like the the tomb of Al-Saman just south of Kobani, which was like Turkish territory, or like they recognized it and they evacuated it like about a year and a half into the conflict. But then, the Russians showing up. So you got the Turks, which we have an, Innsbruck air base, but we couldn't go into Turkey. We had to go to Iraq to get gas. And then, the Turks hate the Kurds, which we're supporting the Kurds. Like, man, what just a hodgepodge of stuff going on,
Complicated ROE.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's obviously a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Well, what else? I guess from that deployment, you said it's spicy. So when you say that, what are some of the things that stand out and you reflect upon?
So the unit I was with, they were there. I wasn't in that platoon when that whole Conoco versus Russia thing happened. So we had a Medevac platoon within 20-minute flight for when that happened, I believe. And then Kobani kicked off, which was pretty wild when the Rangers and SF went into Kobani. So that the two platoons we had in Syria was, can we respond to this? Because they're not really military potentially. And then anytime that our partners of the SDF and the Kurds would get injured, if there was U.S. coalition or coalition troops with them, they could respond, but you couldn't bring the Syrians into Iraq where the higher level of care was, so you had to bring them to a field hospital, which was weird. Versus in Iraq, it was still pretty dynamic combating ISIS between Special Forces, coalition partners, Task Force Hydra from France, just everybody going into caves and stuff. It was, you never knew if you were going to launch for some dude on a FOB that had a gallstone or kidney stones or troops in contact. There really was no rhyme or reason. There was no pattern or flow, or one month was different than another month.
That's wild thinking. And you're out there. Like that's not a short flight to anywhere friendly.
No. At the time, Iraq was still pretty built up. So you had Erbil, you had FOB in Kirkuk, you still had Q West, you still had Mosul, Taji, another one that starts with a B, and then Baghdad. So you really were within 30 minutes of care from injury to getting in a helo, but it was pretty wild.
When you came back from that deployment, you said you went to air assault. Can you explain to me the difference? Like, are you able to, transition between these? That's kind of what I'm gathering here. It's a different world. Right.
So our state or organization, we've got Chinooks, UH-60s, HH-60s, and then a C-12 or a King Air. So wherever there are Blackhawks, they can just pick and pull and form a unit as required. So after that deployment, the instructor pilot for the air assault company was getting out, and they were like, well, you have experience. We're going to stick you here. All right.
Yeah, obviously the dust-off mission, the Medevac, that seems relatively self-explanatory, but can you dive into the air assault mission and what that is?
Sure. So we do, we pretty much bring the people in to seize and hold key terrain so they can destroy stuff. And then we do air movements, battlefield circulation, general support stuff. But our bread and butter is getting people to wherever they need to go, plus or minus 30 seconds. And as long as a helicopter can fit, we'll land you there. If we can't fit, we'll hover and fast rope you out or whatever it needs to be.
Is there a lot of integration with like AH-64s with that? I mean, I would think there would be, but
Stateside, not as much as you'd want, but deployed, yeah. We work really, really well with them. Especially because they have like great sensors. So deployed working with them and Kingpin to figure out, what's the, the status of where you're going. Is a landing area hot, cold, enemy in the area? They've got all the sensors that we don't. I mean, you look at our aircraft and we got moving maps, a radar altimeter, and a fully coupled autopilot, and that's about it. We got no sensors or anything, no ability to see anything on the battlefield except for our eyes. So it's really, really nice having anybody that can scan forward.
Yeah, interesting that they don't like put FLIR. I mean, I know it comes down to money, but like if everyone had some kind of like poor man's FLIR on there and just the ability to look forward and see or scan the landing zone or whatever, like it would be a huge essay enhancing tool, but it's probably X million dollars per copy. So not today.
Well, 1/60th crack the nut, and their FLIR, they can punch a grid into it and it'll slew to it. So you actually know what you're landing to a couple miles out, which is great. So just looking at a printed, 3x5 note card of this is where you're landing with a, overhead view, not an approach view. It's like, I think I'm going to the right spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think in today's world. But again, I know it's probably $5 million per helicopter or something just, crazy that it's been cost prohibitive. So now you just got to be a champion and just make it happen without seeing. No big deal.
Yeah.
At least you got the just the tubular, if you will, old school nog, so you can really clear out there and see look through the soda straw and see what's going on.
Oh yeah, a lot. You got to look around a lot. It's or else you don't really get that motion parallax or that depth perception.
I think again, I remember my casual days. I didn't know anything, but they had a couple guys testing the 4 tube NVGs. I think it ended up getting they ended up not going. It was probably cost prohibitive, or like hurt their neck or something. But again, until you wear NVGs in the military, or not the ones you see SEAL Team 6 wearing on TV shows, you're just like, dude, this is really, really challenging to like just see straight ahead. I literally have to turn my head and body everywhere I want to look.
Oh yeah,
no lobster eyeing anything out of that, but.
No, it's not what the video games will have you believe.
Yeah.
It's
where you can see everything, same field of view. There had to be some challenges, I would imagine, going from doing medevac to air assault. I would imagine there's differences in the platforms to a certain degree with avionics and setups and stuff like that. What were some of those challenges?
So the medevac aircraft does have a forward-looking infrared. They also have additional radios. Everybody's favorite radio, the C-Cell. We're supposed to be able to link into that, but it never works. Ever.
Good.
It's advertised.
Good to know.
But the mission with the rescue hoist, that's a task that's demanding. Having a precision hover with no references at 100, 200, 300 feet is difficult. The Army does...
unpack that a little bit more. What does that exactly mean? Like precision hover at no references.
Right. The way that the Army has really figured out the rescue hoist to not cause injury to anybody is we want to be out of ground effect when we're doing a rescue hoist. So higher than the Coast Guard or the Air Force will do, or even civilian HEMS, because a rotor wash right at that center third causes it does a lot of reaction to the people on the winch. It'll cause them to spin, or to sway forward and back or left to right. So we want to get them through that as fast as possible so we don't have any incidents, especially if they develop a large pendulum motion that winch line can get caught on our wire strike system, and they're no longer attached to the helicopter, which isn't ideal.
Suboptimal.
Yeah.
That'd be oh man, I'd be an angry ghost. You know, if like you get rescued and then your cable gets cut. Yeah, your cable gets cut by the helicopter. Oh, I'd be one angry ghost.
So the way that we do it now is we'll still be flying right around 45 knots, slowing to 0 to our pinpoint stop out of ground effect, and we're trying to time it so right when we stop movement, we're just dropping that rescuer about 10-15 feet to the rest of the way down. They unhook. We start winching up, fly away. For Medevac, that's important because you get somebody with like a split open chest or abdomen or any injuries. You don't want to throw Iraq dust in that or any dirt in that.
Yeah. Again, you survive, but then you get some like whatever virus that's been buried in the desert for 4,000 years, and then you just stirred it up. And
exactly. So we get out of there. The medic does everything they need to, either bring them up on a rescue basket or a sked, which is kind of like a roll-out stretcher. And then similar thing, drop the hook on our way in, solid hover. And the no reference piece means like generally when you're hovering a helicopter, you have something to look at, whether it's a taxiway sign, tree, building, anything like that. So you can really figure out when you start to drift so you can stop it. But when you're 100, 200 feet above any obstacle, it's that little amount of drift that might be 6 feet on the ground is inches when you're up in the cockpit.
Okay, that makes sense now.
Precision accuracy is super important because if you're lifting them with the winch, it's because you can't land. So that your margin of error of putting them into a tree is kind of high.
So the Army has said higher is better or safer, which makes it more challenging for you because, again, unless it's like a huge landmark with no reference, then you really can't see the movement as the pilot. Did I recap that correctly?
Yep.
Yeah, I can be a helicopter pilot now.
Yeah,
easy peasy.
But it's always up to the discretion of the aircrew. Pretty much we want to be above the highest obstacle because you don't want to put a rotor blade into a tree or building, wires, etc. Yeah, so if you need to be lower, you can. It's just you're putting the dudette on the winch line at a little bit higher risk.
Self-preservation seems like a thing. It's probably like a decade. I won't try to pull it up because obviously I failed the first time around. I was editing afterwards. It's probably a decade old. I think it's out. It's out in the desert, so I'm assuming like Arizona. The lady's getting hoisted up. She's doing like 60 RPMs. Which is like relatively quick in a basket. Just it's amazing that thing didn't like snap off like to begin with. But
no, and what was attached to that was a rope, and then it's got like an 80-pound breakaway, and that 80-pound broke away, and it just, if you saw it's that the shoe was on a sked, and it started counter rotating against the main rotor, so it was spinning counterclockwise, while the rotor RPM was spinning clockwise, and it's just the effects of the rotor downwash are significant.
I don't remember how that one ended. I assume it ended with her getting inside the helicopter, but I think it was a she. I'm probably butchering that too. But even just like getting that thing up to the helicopter, does it slow? Does that effect get less and slow down if it does happen? Gotta catch a basket that's spinning around. That's just all around bad situation. It's almost like, just don't save me today. Just break away, and this just wasn't my day.
Right. So we did a lot of review on that incident to never make it onto YouTube as an organization. And what came of it was our corrective action for that is either to lower the person being rescued onto the ground to stop that spin, or we'll just start flying. Less than 100 knots, which is super fast. I'm not sure if you know how fast 100 knots is.
That'd be It would be rather breezy. Put your car window down at 80 miles an hour and see how that feels.
But the drag from that equipment that they're in will actually stop the rotation, stop the swinging, and then we'll be able to winch you up in the aircraft safely. Which is the way that we do it now. As soon as they get back on the line, they clear the trees, we start flying away. And 45 knots seems to be the sweet spot in my experience of they stop spinning, they stop swinging, and we bring them up at about 290-ish feet per minute, 260 feet per minute, and slow them down, grab them inside the aircraft, latch them onto the floor, and take the hook off of them, bring it all the way up, close the door, and then they can do whatever aid they need to inside the aircraft.
So that breakaway on that incident there, so there was a rope tethered. I assume the rope was attached to someone on the ground holding it to, yeah, okay. Yeah, that didn't look like a fun day. I'm glad it worked out. I never knew what the conclusion was. It just, again, as you mentioned, it was YouTube famous there for a while. So not where you want to be.
I'm not defending anybody, but we don't have a calibrated mitt that tells us where 80 pounds of force is or resistance.
Valid. Takes 25 pounds of force to pull 9 Gs in the F-16. What does 25 pounds of force feel like? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just try to rip the stick off. You tell me. All right. So we were down the rabbit hole there because, again, it was going back to the differences and challenges of switching over, which I think brought up the hovering without a reference point there. So we digressed slightly. But, again, doing that transition between these platforms, while inherently, obviously, it's still a Blackhawk, you are making changes with obviously mission set and then avionics and things like that, which take a little bit of time, I would imagine.
Right. Well, I think the largest difference is air assault's deliberate. Unless if you got to do something hasty and just send it, it's extremely deliberate, lots of planning, where the med is when you launch with your crew, 2 pilots, a crew chief, a medic, and most of the time some sort of doc in the back. You're going to you're launching with unclear information, never seeing the place before, and you got to get it right the first time. And generally the information that you got from Merc chat or over the phone or radio is halfway correct. Right. So hopefully you brought the right stuff, whether it's extrication equipment, blood, meds, which that's not my side of the house, but when it gets messed up, it gets blamed on you. So, oh well.
Who, Air Force is going to have PJs in the back with HH-60s. Who's in the back of Dust Off?
So it's we use 68 whiskey, so it's not a average Army medic, but they all start out the same way. Going to the medic school, and then they go to a Fox 1 and a Fox 3 school, which I have no idea what they do, but they go from a Army medic to a paramedic to a critical care flight paramedic. And they'll tell you what, especially on the guard side of the house, these guys and girls, they generally work EMS either at a fire department or for a police department or any EMS. So they're extremely well trained. They send them out to Chicago, which if you're going to send somebody out to treat bullet wounds, I guess Chicago's the right spot to do it.
Yeah. It's where would you rather walk down the street? Like Baghdad or Chicago? Well, maybe Baghdad might be safer.
Yeah. Depending on the neighborhood.
Yeah, yes. Not all, but parts.
And so they're highly, highly trained. And then we have flight physicians that are docs that have limited schooling on how to be an aircrew member. And, you're pretty much a voice-activated meat servo from there. Whatever the medics or the doc needs you to do, wherever they need you to go, you just go and hope you have enough gas.
It's a very honorable mission. I can respect the fact, one, again, going into a combat zone unarmed. That seems spicy. But as you said, too, it's like you don't know what you're really going into each and every time. Every situation is new. It's dynamic. And the challenges that go along with that. To me, it seems like super interesting, again, minus the fact of being like unarmed in a combat zone. But obviously you're doing really good work for people who are having the worst day of their life.
Oh, yeah. And it's sometimes you get to keep in contact with the patients that you had. My first critical medevac was some Pesh dude who was shot 4 times, took out a chunk of his rib cage, got him to help. He lived, and like within 90 days, he was back in the fight. And so the SF guys that we would get briefings from before they went on a mission was, generally if dust off can't go, they're not going to SP or roll out of the wire. They're like, oh yeah, that dude that you picked up a couple months ago, yeah, he's fighting with us today. It's like, no way.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Different world for sure. Well, I know we're getting closer to the end here. I do hope you'll hang around for a There I Was story. But before we kind of get to that piece of it, I want to talk about your last deployment and kind of, let me know what it was like. What's happened? I think not that it's like lost in the news cycle, but it's mostly lost in the news cycle. Like I don't think a lot of people are really aware that like OIR is still kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's not as sexy as back in the day of OIFs. It was we spent a lot of time training for it. Biggest thing was communicating with your replacements, which we replaced the New York Army Guard, and they're not even a 20-minute flight from us. So we worked with them in the past of, hey, what do your day-to-day operations look like? And a lot of 6, 7, 8-hour days in the cockpit. So before deployment, we really pressed our air crews to grow that seat endurance from going from a 2-hour sortie to, hey, you're not getting out of the aircraft until a normal banker's hours are complete.
That's a lot of time flying in a helicopter.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of time flying, period, right? But like, that's...
No, we don't have AC. And at 130 degrees, it wears you down.
Yeah. Just shaking yourself apart. Yeah. Sounds great.
So I was initially based out of Patrol Base Shadati, or if people were there, a couple years before, it was Fire Base Shadati, doing med chase, which was great for me because I knew the med mission. They swapped from the legacy Blackhawks to the Mike model, so we had systems integration, maintenance integration was completely different, and I was selected based off of my maintenance background, and I was still flying Limas before deployment with Mikes, which they're just 2 different generations or 2 different blocks. So started doing med chase out there. That site was good enough. They were doing great work out there doing Medevac. So I went back to Erbil at LSA Roberts. Wonderful place. And then we were just doing ring routes and combat support, which was great. It was really rewarding of getting people the stuff that they needed when they needed it. And then we were called up for a couple deliberate operations, but never happened. And, there's a lot of fun that could have been had, but due to optics or whatever, really we weren't the right tool for the job, is what it ended up being. And then, everybody saw in the news when everything started blowing up over there, which was a unique change in warfare. I remember in 2018, they were talking about those quadcopters and dropping the Russian anti-tank mines from those. I was like, that was probably the scariest thing that I could ever think of. And now you get a RC motor on the back of a 200-pound drone with 30 kilograms of explosives on the nose. That was different. So
it's changing. I just put in the newsletter, the Langley, home to our F-22s, some of our F-22s, like they're looking for anti-drone nets because they had last December like a diverse formation of drones that flew over the base and then down to Virginia Beach. But you just look at what's going on, like Ukraine with drones and like how much that's changing. Like, it completely negates a war chest and R&D from any nation. Like, it levels the playing field. That you don't need to build an F-22 to take down X, Y, or Z. You just need a 3D printing farm.
Yeah, and like our systems were super effective against almost all of them. Unfortunately, Christmas Day kind of sucked when Garrett got some shrapnel to the head. But you'd be surprised on the open source side on how effective our base defense is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a ever evolving problem, and it's like that's the one positive thing is like there are a lot of really smart people who are out there trying to solve these complex problems. Companies doing the same thing, so it's a new problem set. It's a new introduction, new tool being introduced to the game, and you just got to counter for it / use it appropriately.
Yeah, no, it's so that kind of changed a lot of the things that we did and how we flew over there. We were flying coin operations of thousands of feet above our AGL, talking with Kingpin and doing all the right things. And then once, Israel got hit, and then they started to take it out on us as well. It changed the game a little bit because we went from not being a valid target to being a valid target again. So we got to do the hood rat shit of flying at 50 to 100 feet and being low and fast, which is a relative term, rotary wing fast, not afterburning
Well, speed
fast.
is relative based on altitude. I'll give you that. Like when you're like below the tree line over a river, like that's pretty fast. There's not a lot of time to figure things out if you mess that one up.
And then, we kind of shifted from people in food or mail to people in bullets, bringing them to the bases because their CRAMs and their coyotes were doing a lot of work, so they needed immediate resupply. So our missions kind of changed from routine to more dynamic on call. Somebody will knock on your door and say, hey, you got to bring these 12 missiles to this base right now. It's like, okay, do it. No problem. And then the politics over there, I don't want to throw shade on anybody, but was wild. From working with gray helicopters, weren't doing the job anymore because they were able to be targeted by other nations over in the Middle East. And so now people that normally the Army would never say that we know about, we're flying them in stuff that says U.S. Army on the side because nobody wants to start another war. And you shoot one of those down and hopefully we're going to fly in some buildings. So it was fun. I had an incredible time, over 500 hours in 9 months, and flying with the best people in the world and supporting the best people in the world was incredible. And it was all NATO and U.S. stuff. So it's just, make the best out of what you got and have a lot of pride in it.
No, I mean, I love that aspect of it. I mean, the military, it has its pluses and minuses. There's a lot of like pain we like to gripe about. Like in the end, right? Like the cliche thing is like the people you get to work with, right? Usually everyone wants to be a winner. Everyone wants to do the right thing. Everyone wants to be the best at what they're doing. And when you're around an environment like that, dude, it's contagious. It's a good environment to be around. I did enjoy that aspect of it. And then there's DTS, which is really, and there's commander's calls, the things that everyone's like, all right, man, whatever, mandatory fun.
Hearts and minds right there.
Right? Dude, it is wild, man. Just whole nother podcast in of itself, obviously people study this for life, like the dynamics of what's going on in the world right now, just in the Middle East alone, like it's a conglomerate. We looked at our time in Syria and OIR, the things that were going on. You got Turkey, you got Russia, you got Syria, you got the Kurds, you got the Iraqis, like the Jordan. It's just like, dude, there's a lot of different influences. There's a lot of different desires, motivations, etc. And it's like a lot of moving pieces, man. And then you got 25-year-olds zipping around with things that can kill people and start World War III. It's like, don't mess up. Be a champion. Be a professional. So no big deal.
Don't mess this up. Don't mess this up.
We're all counting on you. Do not mess this up.
Yeah.
Well, what's that?
No, it was just like you said, wild.
Yeah, it's a different play. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, again, if you'll hang around for a There I Was story, what am I missing? What haven't I asked you think would be important for people to know about you or Army aviation, etc.?
About me, nobody's really going to write a book about that, but
you don't know.
Why do we do it? And it's, in all honesty, everybody has that start sign up to join the military, and then we do it because there's other people there. That's really it. Somebody said, "Hey, John, you're deploying tomorrow," and there's U.S. and coalition troops there. It's like, cool. I'm supporting those who would support me.
I like it. It's good stuff. Well, Muttley, thanks for hanging around, sharing your story. Talk to you here in just a second for There I Was. And it was great just to be able to chat with you, little Army aviation. Learn more about helicopters. Again, things I just don't know anything about, but it's always fun to talk about and joke about. But thanks for what you do, and thanks for taking the time today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.